The diner smelled like burnt coffee and broken dreams. I wiped down the same greasy table for the third time, my hands raw and chapped from the industrial soap we used. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow that made even the youngest customers look jaundiced and tired. It was 11 p.m. on a Thursday, and the late shift at Rosie's diner was as dead as my hope of ever getting out of this neighborhood. My feet ached in shoes held together with duct tape. The sole of my left sneaker flapped slightly with each step, a humiliating reminder that I couldn't afford new ones. Not with Mom's medical bills piling up. Not with the rent 3 weeks overdue. Not with the collection agencies calling every morning, their voices dripping with manufactured sympathy that barely concealed their contempt. I was invisible here. That's what I'd become over the past 2 years. A ghost in a stained uniform, refilling coffee cups and clearing plates, apologizing for things that weren't my fault, smiling until my face hurt. 23 years old, and already I felt ancient, worn down to nothing. The bell above the door chimed. I didn't look up immediately. I'd learned not to seem too eager, too desperate for tips. But something made the air in the diner change. A shift in pressure, like before a storm. The usual sounds, the sizzle of the grill, the murmur of the television in the corner, even the buzz of the lights, seemed to fade into a hushed background noise. When I finally glanced toward the entrance, my hands stilled on the table. 3 men stood in the doorway. No, 2 men flanked a third, and the way they positioned themselves, the way they scanned the room with cold, assessing eyes, made it clear they weren't the ones who mattered. They were walls. Protection. The kind of muscle that didn't need to flex to be threatening. The man in the center was younger than I expected. Mid-30s, perhaps, with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, all sharp angles and cruel beauty. He wore a suit that probably cost more than I'd earn in a year, charcoal gray with a subtle sheen that caught the ugly diner lights, and somehow made them look intentional. His shoes gleamed. Even from across the room I could smell him. Not cologne exactly, but something expensive. Leather and smoke and money. Power radiated from him like heat from asphalt in summer, but it was the boy who made my breath catch. He couldn't have been more than 7 years old, small for his age, with the same dark hair as the man whose hand he held. He wore a miniature version of an expensive suit, perfectly tailored. But his eyes... God, his eyes were wrong. Not the eyes themselves, which were large and dark and beautiful, but the expression in them. He looked at the diner the way a prisoner might look at a cell, resigned, hopeless, already defeated. The man spoke quietly to one of his guards, and they moved to a booth in the back corner. The kind of spot where you could see all the exits, where your back was protected. I recognized the instinct, even if I didn't understand it fully. "That's your table, sweetheart." Rosie's voice made me jump. She'd materialized beside me, her 50 years of smoking evident in every word. "And be nice. Real nice. You understand?" There was something in her tone that made my stomach clench. Fear. Rosie, who'd once thrown a drunk trucker out by his ear, who'd faced down health inspectors and loan sharks with equal disdain. She was afraid. "Who is he?" I whispered. "Nobody you want to know." She pressed the order pad into my hand. "Smile. Don't stare. Don't ask questions. And whatever you do, don't mention seeing them here to anyone. Ever." My legs felt weak as I approached their table. Up close, the contrast was even more striking. The man's suit was immaculate, his watch catching the light, something Swiss and expensive. His guards stood nearby, hands clasped in front of them, wires visible in their ears. They looked like they could kill me without breaking a sweat or spilling their coffee, but the boy sat perfectly still, his small hands folded on the table in front of him. He didn't fidget, didn't look around with the curiosity you'd expect from a child. He just stared at his hands, his expression blank, absent, like he'd learned to retreat somewhere inside himself where the world couldn't reach. "Good evening." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Can I get you started with something to drink?" The man's eyes lifted to mine, and I felt the impact like a physical blow. They were dark, almost black, and they looked at me the way a wolf might examine prey. Not with hunger, exactly, with assessment, calculation. Like he could see through skin and bone to catalog every fear, every weakness, every secret I'd ever kept. Coffee. Black. His voice was smooth, cultured, with the faintest trace of an accent I couldn't place. Italian, maybe, or somewhere in the Mediterranean. Water for my son. No ice. I scribbled the order, hyper-aware of my chipped nail polish, the coffee stain on my apron, the way my hand trembled slightly. And would you like to see? The boy's hand moved. It was such a small gesture, just his fingers lifting slightly from the table, curling in a specific pattern. But I recognized it immediately. My little brother Danny was deaf, had been since birth. I'd grown up learning sign language before I could write in cursive, finger-spelling words before I could spell them aloud. The boy signed again, more insistently this time, hungry. My heart stopped. The man hadn't noticed. He was looking at his phone, his attention already elsewhere. Assuming the boy's silence was just silence, the guards stood like statues, unseeing, uncaring. In this expensive suit, surrounded by protection and power, the child was utterly alone. Without thinking, I set down my pad. My hands moved almost of their own accord, muscle memory from years of signing with Danny taking over. What would you like to eat? The boy's head snapped up so fast I heard his neck crack. His eyes, those defeated, hopeless eyes, went wide. For a moment, he just stared at me, and I saw something flicker across his face that looked like pain, like hope was actually painful when you'd given up on it so completely. You can see me? His small hands formed the words with desperate precision. You can see me? The air went out of my lungs. I see you. I signed back. I see you. The man's phone clattered onto the table. When I looked up, his expression had changed completely. The calculated coldness had shattered, replaced by something I couldn't name. Shock. Disbelief. And beneath that, something darker. Something possessive and dangerous that made every instinct scream at me to run. You sign. It wasn't a question. His voice had dropped an octave, gone rough and raw. You know, sign language. My brother. I started, but he cut me off with a gesture. How long have you worked here? 2 years. My mouth was dry. Sir, I didn't mean to. What's your name? Emma. Emma Chen. He leaned back in the booth and I watched him process this information, watched calculation replace the brief crack in his composure. His son was signing frantically now, his small hands moving so fast I could barely keep up. She sees me. Papa, she sees me. She knows. She understands. My son. The man's voice caught, and he cleared his throat. My son Marco has been unable to speak since his mother died 3 years ago. We've seen specialists, therapists, the best doctors money can buy. He paused, his jaw working. No one has been able to communicate with him. He refuses to engage, refuses to try. They all said, "Why?" He trailed off, his eyes dropping to his son, who was still staring at me like I'd performed a miracle. They all said he'd locked himself away somewhere we couldn't reach. The boy, Marco, signed again, his expression pleading. Tell him I'm not broken. Tell him I'm still here. Tears burned my eyes. He says he's not broken. He's still here. The man's hand moved to his son's head, fingers tangling in dark hair. For just a moment, the dangerous, powerful man disappeared, and I saw something raw and human underneath. Grief. Love. Desperate, aching love. What else does he say? Marco's hands moved again. I've been alone for so long. No one understands. No one tries. I translated, my voice barely above a whisper. He's been alone. No one understands him. No one tries. Because he's mute. The man's voice had gone soft, dangerous in a different way now. They see mute, and they assume he's not mute, and the words came out before I could stop them. He's deaf. Silence crashed over the table like a wave. The man stared at me, then at his son, then back at me. What? He's deaf, sir. I don't know how no one caught it, but I gestured helplessly. He signs fluent ASL, American Sign Language. He's been communicating this whole time. Just, no one was listening. Marco's hands moved again, frantic. 3 years. 3 years I've been screaming and no one heard me. The explosion, Mama. I can't hear anything, and they keep talking, and I don't understand, and... He says... My voice broke. He says he's been trying to communicate for 3 years, since the explosion that killed his mother. He lost his hearing then, but everyone kept talking at him, and he couldn't understand, and... I couldn't finish. The man's face had gone absolutely white. Dio. The word was barely audible. Dio mio, the car bomb. The doctors checked everything, his legs, his lungs, his heart, never his ears. We never thought... His hand tightened in his son's hair. 3 years. My son has been trapped in silence for 3 years because we never thought to check. He looked up at me then, and the expression in his eyes made my blood run cold. It wasn't gratitude. It was something far more dangerous, something dark and obsessive and utterly terrifying. You, he said softly, are going to come work for me. Sir, Not a request, Emma-chen. He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. My son needs you, which means I need you. And what I need... He smiled, and it was like watching a shark smile, beautiful, deadly. I take... One of the guards stepped forward, pulling out a business card, plain black, embossed with silver. Just a phone number, nothing else. Someone will contact you tomorrow about arrangements, the man continued. You'll be compensated, generously. Your mother's medical bills, yes, I already know about those, will be handled. Your rent, your debts, all of it gone. In exchange, you'll come to my home daily to teach my son. To help him. His eyes locked on mine. To be what he needs. I can't just... You can. He stood, and suddenly he was looming over me, all predatory grace and barely leashed danger. You will. Because if you refuse, Emma, I'll make sure every medical facility in this city knows your mother is no longer welcome. Every landlord knows not to rent to you. Every employer knows not to hire you. I'll erase your life so thoroughly, you'll wish you'd never been born. He leaned closer, and I could smell that expensive scent again, could feel the heat of him, the danger. But if you cooperate, he murmured, if you give my son what he needs, what no one else has been able to give him, then I'll give you everything you need, protection, money, security, a life where you never have to worry about coffee stains on your apron or duct tape on your shoes. All you have to do, his hand came up, fingers ghosting along my jaw, is say yes. Marco was signing again, his small face desperate. Please, please don't leave me alone again. I looked at the boy, at his father, at the guards who watched with dead eyes, at the black card in my trembling hand, and I knew with absolute bone-deep certainty that my life had just changed forever. That I'd just made a deal with the devil, and I had no idea what price I'd really pay. Yes, I whispered. The man smiled. Good girl. The black Mercedes pulled up outside my apartment building at exactly 8 a.m. I'd barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marco's desperate hands forming those signs, saw his father's predatory smile, felt the weight of that business card burning in my pocket like a brand. I'd called Rosie at 6 a.m. to quit. She hadn't argued, hadn't asked questions, just said, "Be careful, honey," in a voice that suggested she knew exactly how much danger I was in, and hung up. Now, I stood on the cracked sidewalk in my only clean jeans and a sweater with a small hole near the hem, watching a man in a black suit step out of the driver's seat. He was built like a tank, with a shaved head and a scar running from his temple to his jaw. One of the guards from last night. Miss Chen. He opened the back door. Mr. Dominic Russo is expecting you. Dominic Russo. So that was his name. I'd spent 2 hours on my phone last night, searching. I'd found nothing. No social media, no news articles, just whispers on forums that went dead the moment his name appeared. The kind of silence that money and fear could buy. But I didn't need Google to tell me what I already knew in my bones. Dominic Russo was a monster. And I'd just agreed to walk into his home. The car's interior smelled like leather and something sharper, gun oil maybe. The seats were cream-colored, spotless, obscenely comfortable. I sank into them and felt like I was being swallowed. The guard, He hadn't given me his name, slid behind the wheel and pulled smoothly into traffic. "Where are we going?" My voice sounded small. "The estate." 40 minutes outside the city. He met my eyes in the rearview mirror. "Mr. Russo wanted me to inform you that your mother has been transferred to St. Catherine's Medical Center. Private room. Best oncology team in the state. All expenses covered." My throat closed. "What?" "He also cleared your rent balance and paid 6 months in advance. Your student loans have been satisfied. Credit card zeroed out." His tone was completely neutral, like he was reading a grocery list. "He takes care of what belongs to him." What belongs to him? I pressed my hand against my stomach, fighting nausea. This was moving too fast. Way too fast. Less than 12 hours ago, I'd been nobody. A waitress drowning in debt. Now I was being driven to some estate. My entire life rearranged by a man who looked at me like I was something he'd decided to collect. The city fell away, replaced by suburbs, then countryside. Trees lined the road, their autumn leaves burning gold and red in the morning sun. We turned onto a private drive. Actual iron gates that swung open as we approached. Security cameras tracking our progress. The driveway stretched for at least a mile, winding through manicured grounds that looked like something from a magazine. Then the house came into view, and I stopped breathing. It wasn't a house. It was a compound. Stone and glass and modern architecture that probably had a name I couldn't pronounce. 3 stories. Sprawling wings. Floor-to-ceiling windows that reflected the morning light like mirrors. Fountains. Gardens. Actual goddamn peacocks strutting across the lawn. "Holy shit," I whispered. The guard's mouth twitched. Might have been a smile. "Mr. Russo will meet you in the main hall." He opened my door, and I stepped out onto gravel that crunched beneath my worn sneakers. Up close, the house was even more intimidating. All clean lines and expensive taste. The kind of place where everything cost more than my life and looked like it belonged in a museum. The front door opened before we reached it. Dominic stood in the entrance, and the morning light hit him like he'd been designed for it. He'd traded last night's suit for dark slacks and a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, exposing forearms roped with muscle and marked with scars. His hair was slightly damp, like he'd just showered. He looked younger in the daylight, more human. But his eyes were the same, predatory, possessive, hungry. Emma. My name in his mouth sounded like ownership. "Welcome." I climbed the steps, hyper-aware of the guards flanking the entrance, of cameras in the corners, of the way Dominic tracked my every movement. When I reached the top, he stepped aside, gesturing me into a foyer that could have fit my entire apartment 3 times over. Marble floors, a chandelier that looked like frozen stars, artwork on the walls that I recognized from textbooks, actual originals worth millions. A staircase that curved upward like something from a fairy tale, if fairy tales involved men who threatened to destroy your life with a smile. "Your mother is settled," Dominic said, closing the door. The sound echoed. Final. "I spoke with her oncologist this morning. Stage 3, but treatable. She'll start aggressive therapy next week." I turned to stare at him. "You talked to her doctor?" "I own the hospital." He said it like it was nothing. "She's being cared for by the best. I've also arranged for a nurse to check on her daily. You're welcome to visit whenever you'd like. I'll have Antonio drive you." Antonio. The guard with the scar. "Why?" The word came out hoarse. "Why are you doing this?" Dominic moved closer, his footsteps silent on the marble. "I told you. My son needs you. That means you need to be taken care of. No distractions, no worries, nothing standing between you and helping Marco." He stopped just inside my personal space, close enough that I could feel his body heat. "I take care of what's mine, Emma, and you." His hand came up, fingers catching my chin, tilting my face up. "You became mine the moment you signed to my son." His touch was warm, gentle, absolutely terrifying in its tenderness. "I'm not," I started, but he cut me off with a look. "You are. You just don't understand it yet." He released me, stepping back. "But you will. Now come. Marco has been awake since 6, waiting for you." He led me through the house, and I tried to memorize the path. Through the foyer, down a hallway lined with more art, past rooms I couldn't name, all marble and wood and obscene wealth. We passed guards stationed at intervals, each one nodding to Dominic with deference that bordered on fear. Maids in uniforms. A man in a suit speaking rapid Italian into a phone. This wasn't a home. It was a fortress, a kingdom. And Dominic was its king. The previous tutors and therapists worked with Marco in the West Wing, Dominic said as we walked. Sterile rooms, clinical. They treated him like a problem to solve. His jaw tightened. You'll work with him in the library, somewhere comfortable. Somewhere he might actually want to be. We stopped in front of double doors. Real wood, carved with intricate patterns. Dominic pushed them open, and I stepped into the most beautiful room I'd ever seen. The library was 2 stories tall, with bookshelves reaching toward a domed glass ceiling. Sunlight poured in, illuminating thousands of books, leather-bound, gold-embossed, organized with the kind of care that spoke of someone who actually loved them. There were reading nooks with velvet chairs, a fireplace big enough to stand in, and in the center, a massive oak table covered in papers and art supplies. Marco sat at the table, his small body swallowed by an oversized chair. He wore casual clothes today, jeans and a sweater, but he still looked painfully formal, his posture rigid, his hands folded. When he saw me, his entire face transformed. You came. His signs were frantic, joyful. I thought I dreamed you. I thought you weren't real. I crossed to him without thinking, dropping to my knees so we were eye level. I'm real. I promised I'd help you, remember? No one keeps promises. His small hands trembled. Everyone leaves. I won't leave. The words came out before I could stop them, and I felt Dominic's gaze burning into my back. I promise. Marco launched himself at me, his small arms wrapping around my neck, his face buried in my shoulder. He didn't make a sound, couldn't make a sound, but I felt him shaking, felt the desperate way he clung to me like I was the only solid thing in his world. Over his head, I met Dominic's eyes. The expression on his face made my blood run cold. It was raw, unguarded, grief and rage, and something darker coiling beneath it all. He looked at his son in my arms like he was seeing something precious finally within reach, and he looked at me like I was the key to a lock he'd been trying to break for 3 years, like I was something he'd kill to keep. Thank you, he said softly. 2 simple words that somehow sounded like a threat, and a promise, and a prayer all at once. I held Marco tighter and wondered what the hell I'd gotten myself into. The next 3 hours passed in a blur of signs and tears and small revelations. Marco's ASL was fluent, but limited, the vocabulary of a 4-year-old frozen in time, never expanding, because he'd had no one to practice with, no one to teach him new words. He signed about his mother with hands that shook, about the explosion, about waking up in a hospital where everyone's mouths moved but no sound reached him, about thinking he was broken, about screaming silently for help that never came. The doctors touched my ears, he signed, his small face crumpling. But they were looking for blood, for damage they could see. They never tested if I could hear them. An explosion that close would have ruptured your eardrums, I said aloud, signing simultaneously. The blast pressure, it's actually common. But if there was other trauma, other injuries, the hearing loss might have seemed less urgent. I touched his hand gently. No one thought to check because you could still vocalize. You cried. You made sounds. So they assumed... I stopped making sounds when I realized no one was listening. His signs were bitter. Too bitter for a 7-year-old. I stopped trying. Dominic had been standing by the window, pretending to work on his phone, but I knew he was watching. Listening. When Marco signed that, I saw his hand tighten around the phone, saw the muscle in his jaw jump. What's he saying? His voice was rough. I hesitated. He's explaining why he stopped vocalizing. He realized no one was listening, so I swallowed. He gave up trying to communicate. The phone hit the window ledge with a crack. Dominic's back was to us, his shoulders rigid. 3 years. My son has been drowning, and I never knew. The best doctors, the best therapists, millions of dollars. His laugh was jagged, broken, and a waitress saw in 5 minutes what they couldn't see in 3 years. Papa is angry, Marco signed, his eyes wide. Not at you, I signed back quickly. Never at you. He's angry at himself, at the people who are supposed to help. He's always angry. Marco's small hands moved slowly. Since Mama died, he's angry and sad and he holds me, but he never smiles anymore. The ache in my chest was physical. I glanced at Dominic, at the rigid line of his spine, the way his hands gripped the window ledge like he was holding himself back from putting them through the glass. He says you're always angry now, I said quietly, since his mother died. That you hold him, but you don't smile. Dominic's head dropped. For a long moment he didn't move. Then he turned, and the look on his face was devastating. Raw grief mixed with rage, guilt, and something that looked like desperation. He crossed the room in 3 strides and dropped to his knees beside his son. His hands that I somehow knew had killed, had hurt, had done terrible things, came up to frame Marco's small face with heartbreaking gentleness. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. Mio filio, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. If I'd known. He stopped, his throat working. I would have torn the world apart to fix this. I would have learned. I would have... Marco reached up and touched his father's face, his small fingers tracing the sharp line of his jaw, then his hands moved. You're here now. We're here now. She can help us. I translated, my own voice thick with tears, and watched Dominic close his eyes. Watched something crack in him, something that had been holding him together through sheer force of will. Yes, he whispered. She can help us. His eyes opened, finding mine, and the intensity there made me want to run. She will help us. It wasn't a request. It was a decree. By noon, I'd assessed Marco's needs. Hearing aids wouldn't help with ruptured eardrums, but there were cochlear implant options, speech therapy programs, educational strategies. I made lists while Marco drew pictures beside me, his small hand occasionally reaching out to touch my arm, like he needed to confirm I was still there. Dominic had disappeared to take several phone calls, his voice carrying from the hallway, sharp Italian mixed with English. Words like consolidate and eliminate the problem, and I don't care what it costs. The voice of someone used to absolute power. When he returned, he had a woman with him, mid-50s, professionally dressed, carrying a tablet. This is Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Dominic said. Best audiologist in the country. I've flown her in to consult. He looked at me. You'll work with her. Whatever Marco needs, whatever equipment, whatever therapy, you tell her. She makes it happen. Dr. Mitchell smiled at me, but there was a wariness in her eyes. She knew who Dominic was, what he was, and she was terrified of disappointing him. We spent an hour going over options while Marco played with building blocks nearby, testing his responses, discussing implant surgery, mapping out a communication plan. Dominic listened to everything, asked precise questions, and made decisions with the kind of authority that brooked no argument. Surgery in 2 weeks, he said finally. Best surgeon, private facility. Emma, you'll be there. I'm not family. You're whatever I say you are. He cut me off smoothly. Marco trusts you. That makes you essential. His eyes held mine. You'll be there. Dr. Mitchell gathered her things and left, practically fleeing, and I was alone with Dominic and Marco again. The little boy had fallen asleep on the leather couch, exhausted from the emotional morning, his small body curled up like he was trying to take up as little space as possible. Dominic stood over his son, and for just a moment, the monster disappeared. He was just a father looking at his child with an expression of such profound love and pain that it physically hurt to witness. His mother, Sophia. She was the light in him, Dominic said quietly, not looking at me. She was gentle, kind, everything I'm not. When she died, his jaw tightened. A rival family. They planted a car bomb meant for me. She was taking Marco to school. Wrong place. Wrong time. She was gone before the ambulance arrived. My throat closed. I'm sorry. A sorry doesn't bring her back. His voice went flat. But revenge does. I found every man involved. Every single one. And I made sure they understood. He stopped, seeming to remember who he was talking to. When he looked at me, His eyes were cold again. Dead. I made sure they paid. I should have been horrified, should have run. But all I could think about was Marco, signing about the explosion, about his mama, about being trapped in silence. He needs stability now, I said. Routine. Safety. No more strangers coming and going. No more clinical approaches. I met Dominic's gaze despite every instinct screaming at me to look away. He needs to feel like someone actually sees him. Not his disability, not his trauma, him. That's why you're here. Dominic moved closer, and I forced myself not to step back. You see him. You understand him. He reached out, his fingers ghosting along my cheek, and he's already attached to you. In less than a day, you've given him more hope than 3 years of therapy. His touch was gentle, possessive, terrifying. Which means, he continued softly, you're not leaving. Not now. Not ever. You're his, Emma. Which means you're mine. You can't just... I can. His hand slid to the back of my neck, and I felt the steel beneath the gentleness. I own this city. I own everyone in it. Politicians, police, judges. They all answer to me. Your old life? It doesn't exist anymore. I've erased it. This... He gestured to the library, to the sleeping child, to the obscene wealth surrounding us. This is your life now. I'm not a possession. No. His thumb brushed my jaw. You're something far more valuable. You're necessary. You're the key to my son's happiness, and I will do anything. Destroy anyone, burn down anything, to keep you here. He said it like a promise, like a threat, like both. And when I looked into his eyes, I saw the truth there. Saw the obsession already taking root. Dark and twisted and absolute. He'd decided I belonged to him, decided I was essential, and nothing I said would change that. I was trapped in a golden cage, and the door had just locked behind me. Marco stirred on the couch, his small hand reaching out even in sleep, searching for something to hold on to. Without thinking, I crossed to him and took his hand. He settled immediately, his breathing evening out, his face relaxing. When I looked back, Dominic was watching us with an expression that made my heart stutter, hungry, possessive, utterly, terrifyingly devoted. Good girl, he murmured. You're learning. And I realized with bone-deep certainty that I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life, or maybe my only choice for survival. I wasn't sure there was a difference anymore. 2 weeks dissolved into a routine that felt like surrender. Every morning, Antonio picked me up at 7 a.m. Every morning, I walked into that library and found Marco already waiting, his small face lighting up the moment he saw me. We'd spend hours signing, learning, playing, teaching him that communication wasn't something lost, but something that could be rebuilt, reclaimed. He was brilliant, hungry for knowledge, for connection, for the simple act of being understood. And every day, Dominic watched. He was always there, hovering at the edges, sometimes working at the desk in the corner, his attention apparently on contracts and phone calls. But I felt his gaze constantly tracking my movements. Sometimes he'd sit in one of the leather chairs, ostensibly reading, but his eyes would lift whenever Marco laughed. A silent, shaking laugh that showed in his whole body, and the expression on Dominic's face would crack into something almost tender before hardening again. He was terrifying in his attention, in the way he noticed everything. Like the third day, when I'd arrived with blisters from my old shoes. By noon, Antonio had delivered 6 pairs of designer sneakers in my exact size, all broken in and comfortable. Mr. Russo noticed you were limping, Antonio had said, his scarred face impassive. He doesn't like when you're in pain. Or the 5th day, when I'd mentioned missing my mother during lunch. By evening, Dominic had arranged for her to be brought to the estate, private medical transport, a suite prepared with hospital-grade equipment, round-the-clock nursing staff. She'll recover here, he'd said, like moving a cancer patient to his home was normal, where you can see her without leaving Marco. Every gift felt like a chain. Every kindness felt like ownership. I should have been grateful. My mother was getting treatment that would have bankrupted us. Marco was thriving. I had money in my bank account, payment for services rendered, though I'd never discussed salary, and security I'd never imagined. But I felt it tightening around me, the golden cage closing. Dominic never touched me inappropriately, never made crude advances, but there was something in the way he looked at me, possessive and hungry and patient, like a predator that had already chosen its prey and was simply waiting for the right moment to strike. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at my hands while I signed to Marco, his expression almost reverent. Other times, his gaze would linger on my face with an intensity that made my skin burn. And twice I'd woken in the night in the guest room they'd given me, because of course I was staying over now, couldn't possibly waste time commuting when Marco needed me, to find Dominic standing in my doorway, just standing, watching me sleep. When I'd startled awake, he'd simply said, "Making sure you're comfortable," and disappeared like smoke. It was the most disturbing form of courtship I could imagine. But Marco made it bearable. He was opening up like a flower finally given sunlight. We'd established a routine of lessons, play, and quiet time where he'd curl up against me while I read to him, my hands signing the story simultaneously. He started smiling, really smiling. And one afternoon, 2 days before his surgery, he vocalized. Just a small sound, while trying to imitate a sign. But Dominic had been in the room, and I watched him go absolutely still, his entire body tensing like he'd been struck. "Did you hear that, Papa?" Marco signed excitedly. "I made a sound." Dominic crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled his son into his arms, his face buried in Marco's dark hair. His shoulders shook. The most powerful, dangerous man I'd ever met was crying, and Marco's small hands came up to pat his father's back with the kind of tenderness that shattered something in my chest. "It's okay, Papa." Marco signed when Dominic finally pulled back. "Emma says I can learn to talk again after the surgery. She says I can be normal." "You are normal," I signed fiercely. "You're perfect exactly as you are. The implants just give you more options." But Dominic caught my wrist, his grip gentle but immovable. "No," he said hoarsely. "Tell him the truth. Tell him he's extraordinary, that he survived what would have broken most men, that he's the strongest person I know." I translated, and Marco's eyes filled with tears. He launched himself back into his father's arms, and I turned away, giving them privacy for a moment that felt too raw, too intimate for witnesses. That's when I noticed the man in the doorway. He was young, late 20s, with the same dark hair as Dominic, but a softer face, less sharp. He wore an expensive suit, but carried himself differently, less predatory confidence and more careful control. When our eyes met, he smiled, and it was genuine, warm, dangerous in a completely different way. "You must be the miracle worker," he said, his voice accented like Dominic's but lighter. "I'm Luca, Dominic's younger brother." Dominic's head snapped up, his arm still around Marco. "What are you doing here?" "Family dinner, remember? You demanded my presence." Luca's eyes stayed on me, though no one mentioned you'd acquired something so interesting. The word acquired made my skin crawl. "Emma is helping Marco," Dominic said, standing, positioning himself slightly between us. "She's off limits." "Off limits." Luca's smile widened. Interesting phrasing for Tello. Not, "She's an employee." Not, "She's a professional." Off limits. Like she belongs to you. "She does." The words hung in the air like smoke. I felt them settle over me, felt the weight of Dominic's claim, public now, witnessed. Not a girlfriend. Not a partner. Property. Something owned. "I don't belong to anyone," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Luca laughed, but Dominic's expression went cold. "You belong to Marco, which means you belong to me. We've established this, Emma." He said my name like a warning. "Don't make me remind you what happens to things I own when someone tries to take them." "Jesus, Dominic," Luca muttered. "You're scaring the girl." "Good. She should be scared. Everyone should be scared." Dominic's hand found the small of my back, possessive, claiming. "Fear keeps you alive, keeps you careful, keeps you mine." Marco tugged on my sleeve, his small face worried. "Is Papa being scary again?" "A little," I admitted. "He does that when he's afraid." Marco signed matter-of-factly. He gets mean when something might be taken away. The observation was too astute for a 7-year-old. Too knowing. What kind of life had this child lived to understand his father's violence as fear? Dinner was an exercise in tension. The dining room was obscene, a table that could seat 20, crystal and china that probably cost more than my old car, food prepared by an actual chef who brought out course after course like we were royalty. Dominic sat at the head of the table, Marco on his right, me on his left. Luca sat beside me, and 3 other men, associates, soldiers, I wasn't sure, filled out the rest of the seats nearest Dominic. They all deferred to him, waited for him to eat first, spoke only when addressed. It was like watching a medieval court. And Dominic was the king holding court, dispensing favor and punishment with equal ease. "The Calabrese family has been dealt with," one of the men reported. "Their operations on the south side have been absorbed. No resistance." "And Sal's nephew?" Dominic's voice was casual, but I saw the way everyone tensed. "In the hospital. He'll survive, but he won't walk again. Good. Let him remember what happens when you steal from me." Dominic cut his steak with precise movements. "What about the shipment? Arrived this morning. The warehouse on—" "Not here." Dominic's eyes flicked to me. "Later." The man paled. "Of course. My apologies." I pushed food around my plate, my appetite gone. This was who Dominic really was, not the grieving father, not the devoted parent trying to help his son. This, a man who broke people's legs for stealing from him, who absorbed entire criminal operations over dinner, who spoke of violence like business transactions. And I was sitting at his table, in his home, belonging to him. "You're not eating," Luca said quietly beside me. "The chef will be offended. I'm not hungry." "You're scared." His voice dropped lower. "You should be. My brother. When he wants something, he doesn't stop until he has it, and he's decided he wants you." I met his eyes. "I'm just here for Marco." "No, you're not." Luca's smile was sad. "You were. But Dominic doesn't do halfway. He doesn't do temporary. You gave his son hope, which means you gave him hope. And now—" He shook his head. "Now you're his. Completely. And the terrifying thing? He'll destroy anyone who tries to take you away. Including you, if you try to leave." "That's insane. That's family." Luca took a sip of wine. "Our father was the same way. Obsessive. Possessive. It's in our blood, the Russo men. When we love, we devour. When we want, we take. When we claim—" He glanced at his brother. "We never let go." Dominic was watching us, his expression unreadable, but I saw the tension in his jaw. The way his hand tightened around his knife. After dinner, Marco was put to bed by his nanny, a kind older woman who signed basic phrases now, thanks to my teaching. I stood to leave, exhausted and desperate for the illusion of privacy in my guest room, but Dominic's hand on my arm stopped me. "Walk with me." It wasn't a request. He led me through the house, past the guards who melted into shadows, through a set of French doors, onto a terrace that overlooked the grounds. The night was cold, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds, and the city lights glowed in the distance, a reminder of the world I'd left behind. Dominic stood at the railing, his profile sharp against the darkness. "Marco's surgery is tomorrow, I know. You'll be there, in the operating room. He requested you." His voice was soft. "He needs you." "I'll be there," I promised. "And after?" Dominic turned to face me. "After he can hear again, after the therapy, after he's himself again. What then, Emma? Do you think you can leave? Walk away?" My throat closed. "I don't know. I do." He moved closer, backing me against the railing. "You can't. You're his now. He loves you, needs you, and He stopped, jaw working. "I need you to stay. Because of Marco. Because of Marco," he agreed. "And because—" His hand came up, fingers tangling in my hair. "Because I've never met anyone who wasn't afraid to see me. Really see me, but you do. You look at me like you know exactly what I am. And you don't flinch. I'm terrified of you," I whispered. "I know." His thumb brushed my cheek. "But you're still here. Still fighting. Still trying to do right by my son even though you know what I'm capable of. That makes you either very brave or very foolish." Or very trapped. His smile was razor sharp. That too. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear. But here's what you don't understand yet, Emma. I don't want you trapped. I want you willing. I want you to choose this. Choose us. Choose me. And if I don't, then I'll make the choice for you. He pulled back just enough to meet my eyes. Because I'm a selfish bastard who takes what he wants. And I want you. Not just for Marco. For me. His mouth crashed into mine before I could respond. Demanding. Possessive. Consuming. I should have fought. Should have pushed him away. But his hands were in my hair, on my waist, holding me like I was precious and breakable. And something in me cracked. I kissed him back, hating myself, hating him, hating how good it felt to be wanted with such terrible intensity. When he finally pulled away, we were both breathing hard. Tomorrow, he said roughly. After the surgery, after Marco's safe, we're going to talk about this, about us, about what you mean to me. His forehead pressed against mine. And you're going to admit you feel it too. This thing between us. This pull. There's no us. Liar. He kissed me again, softer this time, almost tender. But I can wait. I'm patient when I need to be. And you. Another kiss. You're worth waiting for. He released me and walked back inside, leaving me shaking on the terrace, my lips burning, my heart racing, my mind screaming that I was falling into something dark and dangerous and inescapable. And the worst part? I wasn't sure I wanted to escape anymore. The hospital was private, exclusive, sterile in the way only obscene wealth could buy. I sat in the pre-op waiting room at 6 a.m., my hands shaking around a cup of coffee I couldn't drink. Marco had been prepped an hour ago, his small body swallowed by the hospital gown, his eyes wide with fear despite his attempts to be brave. He'd signed to me repeatedly, "You'll be there? You won't leave?" And I'd promised over and over until Dominic had finally pulled him into his arms and carried him through the doors. Now I waited, surrounded by luxury that felt obscene given the circumstances. Leather chairs, artwork on the walls, windows overlooking a private garden. This wasn't a hospital. It was a resort for the dying rich. Luca sat across from me, scrolling through his phone with apparent disinterest, but I'd noticed the way his leg bounced. Nervous energy, even he was affected by this. "He'll be fine," Luca said without looking up. "Best surgeon in the world." Dominic made sure of it. "Kids die in surgery all the time." My voice came out flat. "Money doesn't make you immortal, no, but it helps." He finally looked at me. "You really care about him, Marco. This isn't just a job to you. He's a little boy who's been suffering for 3 years because no one bothered to actually see him." I set down my untouched coffee. "Of course I care. And my brother?" I met his eyes. "What about him? Do you care about him too, or are you just trapped?" Luca's expression was curious, not cruel. "Because I've been watching, the way you look at him when you think no one's paying attention, the way you kissed him back last night on the terrace. Yes, I saw. The cameras see everything in this house." Heat flooded my face. That was inevitable. He leaned forward. "Emma, I'll be honest with you. Dominic is dangerous. He's violent, possessive, and he doesn't understand boundaries. Our father raised us in blood, literally. We were children holding guns, watching executions, learning that love meant ownership and loyalty meant death to traitors." He paused. "But Marco softens him. You soften him. I've seen him smile more in 2 weeks than I have in 3 years. That doesn't make this okay." "No," Luca agreed. "But it makes it real. He's not playing with you, Emma. He's not using you. He's falling, hard and fast and completely, and when Russo men fall, we don't get back up. We just pull the other person down with us." Before I could respond, the doors opened. Dominic stood there in surgical scrubs, a mask hanging around his neck, and the look on his face made my heart stop. "They're ready," he said. "Come." I followed him through sterile hallways, past nurses who averted their eyes, into a viewing room overlooking an operating theater. Through the glass, I could see Marco on the table, so small under the bright lights, surrounded by machines and masked figures in blue. "The surgeon said you could watch from here," Dominic said quietly. "They don't usually allow it, but I explained that Marco would be more comfortable knowing you were close." "How did you explain that?" "I told them you were family." His hand found mine, fingers lacing through. "I told them you were going to be his mother." I should have pulled away, should have argued. But Marco was being put under anesthesia, his small chest rising and falling, and all I could think was, please let him wake up. Please let him be okay. Please. Dominic's grip tightened. He'll survive. He has to. I can't. His voice broke. I can't lose him too. I can't lose anyone else. For the first time, I saw past the monster, saw the man underneath, terrified, grieving, desperately trying to hold together the one piece of his wife he had left. Marco wasn't just his son, he was Dominic's redemption, his reason for breathing, and I was the person keeping that boy alive and whole. "He'll be fine," I whispered, squeezing his hand back. "He's strong, like his father." Dominic looked at me, and something in his expression cracked. "I don't deserve you. Don't deserve your kindness. I've done terrible things, Emma. Things that would make you run screaming if you knew. I've killed men with my bare hands. I've tortured people who betrayed me. I've built an empire on blood and fear." He pulled me closer. "But you make me want to be better. You and Marco. You make me remember what it feels like to be human. Dominic, I love you." The words came out raw, desperate. "I know it's too soon. I know it's fucked up. But I look at you, and I see everything I never thought I could have. Safety. Peace. Something worth protecting that isn't built on violence." His other hand came up, framing my face. "I love you, and I'm terrified of what that means. Terrified of what I'll do to keep you." I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The surgery was happening below us. They were making the first incision. And Dominic was confessing love like a dying man making peace with God. "You don't love me," I managed. "You barely know me. I know you're kind even when the world has been cruel to you. I know you see my son as a person, not a problem. I know you're brave enough to stand up to me even when you're terrified. I know—" He stopped, his thumb brushing my cheekbone. "I know you kissed me back last night. And I know you're falling too, even if you won't admit it. I'm not—" "Liar." But he said it gently. "It's okay. Take your time. I told you. I'm patient. And you're not going anywhere." We watched the surgery in silence after that, his hand never leaving mine. Hours passed. The surgeon worked with meticulous precision, inserting the cochlear implant, threading electrodes, rebuilding what the explosion had destroyed. It was beautiful in its way, science and skill bringing sound back to silence. When it was finally done, when they wheeled Marco to recovery, Dominic pulled me into his arms and held on like I was the only thing keeping him upright. "Thank you," he breathed into my hair. "Thank you for being here, for caring, for giving me hope." I held him back and hated how right it felt. Marco woke up groggy and disoriented, his small hand immediately reaching for me. I was there, holding his fingers, signing with my free hand. "You did so well. It's over. You're safe. Does it work?" His signs were clumsy, still half asleep. "Can I hear now?" "Not yet. The implant has to heal first, a few weeks. Then they'll activate it, and you'll start hearing sounds again. Will it hurt?" "I'll be there," I promised. "Every step. I won't let you face it alone." Dominic stood in the corner, watching us with an expression that made my chest ache. Love. Pure, uncomplicated love for his son. And when his eyes shifted to me, that same love bleeding over, possessive and consuming. The next 2 weeks were intensive. Marco healed quickly, resilient in the way children are, but the anticipation of the activation appointment hung over all of us. Dominic became even more attentive, hovering constantly, arranging for specialists, buying equipment I hadn't even asked for, the library filled with books on hearing rehabilitation, speech therapy tools, anything that might help, and he courted me, ruthlessly. Flowers appeared in my room every morning. Not roses, but wildflowers, bright and cheerful. My favorite foods showed up at meals without me asking. He'd arranged for my mother to have a suite near mine, fully equipped with medical care, so I could see her daily. Every barrier, every excuse I might have for leaving was systematically eliminated. But it was the small things that undid me. The way he'd sit with Marco and me during lessons, learning sign language himself with fierce determination. The way he'd rest his hand on my lower back when we walked, protective and possessive. The way he'd find me reading late at night and sit beside me in silence, just being near. "You're trying to make me dependent on you," I accused one night. "Yes." He didn't even pretend otherwise. "I'm eliminating every reason you might have to leave, making myself indispensable, making this life better than anything you could have elsewhere." That's manipulation. That's love. He caught my chin, tilting my face up. "I told you. Russo men don't do halfway. When we claim something, we keep it. And I've claimed you, Emma. Body and soul. You're mine, and I'll do whatever it takes to make you accept that." "What if I never do?" His smile was dark. "Then I'll keep trying. Forever if I have to. Because you're worth it. Because you're everything." He kissed me softly. "Because I'd burn the world down before I let you go." I should have been horrified, should have run. But his arms around me felt like safety, and his obsession felt like being valued for the first time in my life, and I was so tired of being invisible. So I kissed him back, and I let myself fall. The day of Marco's activation, the hospital room was packed. Dominic, Luca, Antonio, the medical team. Marco sat in a chair, his small body vibrating with nervous energy, and I knelt beside him, signing encouragement. "Ready?" The audiologist signed. Marco looked at me, then at his father, then nodded. The audiologist activated the implant. For a moment, nothing. Marco's face was blank, uncertain. Then his eyes went wide. His hand flew to the side of his head, touching the external processor. His mouth opened in a silent, "Oh." "Marco?" Dominic's voice was barely audible. "Can you hear me?" Marco's head whipped toward his father. Tears streamed down his small face, and then, miracle of miracles, he spoke. "Papa." The word was rough, unpracticed, shaped by a voice that hadn't been used in 3 years. But it was clear. Real. "Papa, I can hear you." Dominic collapsed to his knees, pulling his son into his arms, and I watched them both sob. 3 years of grief and loss, and desperate love pouring out in a moment of perfect, painful joy. The audiologist was explaining something about volume adjustment, about rehabilitation, but no one was listening. Luca had tears on his face. Antonio, the scarred killer, was wiping his eyes. And I was sobbing too, overwhelmed by the sheer weight of this moment. Marco pulled back from his father and turned to me. "Emma." My name in his voice, high and sweet and unpracticed, but mine. "You saved me." "No, sweetheart." I pulled him into my arms. "You saved yourself. You never gave up. But you saw me." He buried his face in my shoulder. "When no one else did. You saw me." Over his head I met Dominic's eyes. They were red, wet, devastated with emotion, and the look he gave me was pure possession, pure love, pure terrifying devotion. "Mine," that look said. "You did this. You gave him back to me, and now you're mine forever." I held Marco tighter and accepted my fate. 3 months after Marco's activation, the world had shifted on its axis. My old life felt like a dream, hazy and distant, something that had happened to someone else. I couldn't remember the last time I'd worried about rent, or walked on cracked sidewalks, or served coffee to people who looked through me. That Emma was gone, replaced by someone who lived in a mansion, who wore clothes that cost more than her old car, who was driven everywhere by Antonio in bulletproof vehicles, who was loved, obsessively, possessively, completely, by the most dangerous man she'd ever met. Marco's progress had been extraordinary. His voice grew stronger daily, words forming with increasing clarity, as speech therapy sessions built new pathways between sound and meaning. He attended a private school now, one Dominic owned, naturally, with a full-time interpreter and support staff. But every afternoon, he came home to me, to our lessons, to sign language that would always be his first language, his comfort, his safe place, and to his father, who had transformed in ways I'd never expected. Dominic still ran his empire, still made men disappear, still held the city in an iron grip that brooked no defiance. But he came home now, every night, no matter what crisis demanded his attention. He walked through those doors by 6 p.m. and became just a father. Just a man who'd sit on the floor with building blocks, who'd listen to his son's halting stories about school, who'd read bedtime stories in Italian and English and broken sign language, who'd find me afterward and pull me into his arms like I was air and he was drowning. "I never thought I'd have this," he'd told me one night, his face buried in my hair, a family. Real happiness. Something worth living for beyond revenge and power. His arms tightened. "You gave me that. You and Marco. You're everything." It should have terrified me. His intensity. His possessiveness. The way he tracked my every movement, knew my schedule better than I did. Had guards following me everywhere, for protection. The way he'd eliminated every threat, real or perceived, with brutal efficiency. Like the man at Marco's school who'd made a comment about special needs kids. He'd been transferred to a facility in Alaska within 24 hours, or the journalist who'd started asking questions about the Russo family. His newspaper went bankrupt 2 weeks later. Or my ex-boyfriend from college who'd tried to reach out via social media. I never heard from him again, and I learned not to ask what happened to people who disappeared from Dominic's radar. But the terrifying part wasn't his violence. It was how safe it made me feel. How protected. How cherished. I was the center of his universe, and he bent reality around me to ensure nothing ever hurt me again. I'd become complicit in my own captivity. Worse, I'd become willing. My mother had recovered beautifully, her cancer in remission, her color returned. She lived in a cottage on the estate grounds now, close enough to visit but far enough for privacy. She'd met Dominic once, and I'd watched her face cycle through fear, recognition, and finally resigned acceptance. "That man would kill for you," she'd said after he left. "Has killed for you, probably. Do you love him?" I'd hesitated too long, and she'd smiled sadly. "Oh, baby, you do. You love him, and you're terrified of it." She was right. I was terrified. Because loving Dominic Russo meant accepting darkness, meant closing my eyes to things that would horrify the old me, meant becoming someone who could live with blood on the hands that held her so tenderly. But I couldn't imagine leaving, couldn't imagine a life without Marco's laughter, without Dominic's fierce devotion, without this strange, dark family that had claimed me so completely. The decision came on a cold December evening. I was in the library with Marco, helping him with homework, when Dominic appeared in the doorway. But something was wrong. His suit was disheveled, his knuckles split and bloody, and there was a coldness in his eyes I hadn't seen in months. "Marco," he said quietly, "go find Luca. Now." Marco looked between us, his newly trained hearing catching the danger in his father's tone. "Papa. Now." The boy fled, and I stood slowly. What happened? The Calabresi family. Dominic's voice was flat. They've been quiet since we absorbed their operations. Too quiet. I should have known they were planning something. He moved toward me, and I saw the fury barely leashed beneath his control. "They tried to take you today. Did you know that?" My blood went cold. "What?" "Antonio noticed a car following your route to your mother's cottage. He ran the plates, stolen, called in backup, intercepted before they could make a move." He stopped in front of me, his bloody hands coming up to frame my face. "They were going to take you, Emma, use you against me, hurt you to hurt me. But I'm fine. Antonio stopped them. This time." His grip tightened. "But they'll try again. They know now. Know that you're my weakness, that I'd burn the world down to keep you safe. And they'll exploit that. Use you. Break you." His forehead pressed against mine. "I can't let that happen. I won't." What are you saying? Marry me. The words hung in the air like smoke. I pulled back to stare at him. Marry me, he repeated. Become my wife, not just in private, but publicly. Let everyone know you're under my protection. That touching you means death. That you're not just the woman I'm obsessed with. You're family. You're sacred. Dominic, that's insane. Is it? He caught my hands. You're already living here, already part of our lives. Marco calls you mama when he thinks I'm not listening. You share my bed more nights than not. The only thing missing is paper and ceremony. His eyes burned into mine. I love you. Completely. Obsessively. I want the world to know you're mine. You want to own me. Yes. He didn't flinch from it. I want to own you, protect you, keep you, love you until we're both dead and buried. I want your name to be Russo. I want my ring on your finger and my child in your belly and my mark on every part of you that exists. I want... He stopped, jaw working. I want you to choose this. Choose me. Not because I've forced you or manipulated you, but because you love me too. You have forced me. I whispered. You've manipulated everything. You've made it impossible to leave. I know. His thumb brushed my cheekbone, and I'm not sorry. I told you from the beginning. I'm selfish. I take what I want, but I also know. His voice softened. I know you feel it too. This connection. This love. You can hate how we got here, but you can't deny what we are now. He was right. God help me. He was right. I loved him. Loved his fierce devotion to Marco. Loved the way he held me like I was precious. Loved how he'd given me a life where I mattered. Where I was seen. Where I was cherished with an intensity that bordered on worship. If I say yes, I said slowly, you have to promise me something. Anything. No more elimination of threats without talking to me first. No more making people disappear because they looked at me wrong. I swallowed. I need to feel like a partner, not a possession. Like I have some say in this life you've built around me. Dominic studied me for a long moment. Then nodded. Done. You want to know about threats, I'll tell you. You want input on how they're handled, you'll have it. But... His expression hardened. If someone tries to hurt you or Marco, all bets are off. I will do whatever is necessary to keep you safe. That's non-negotiable. I wouldn't expect anything less. I took a shaky breath. Yes. Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll be your wife. Yes, I'll be Marco's mother and... My voice cracked. And yes, I love you. Even though you're terrifying and possessive and you've turned my life upside down. I love you. The kiss was desperate, consuming. His hands in my hair, mine fisting his shirt. 3 months of tension and denial and fear finally breaking. When he pulled back, there were tears on his face. You won't regret this, he promised. I'll spend every day making sure you don't regret this. I already regret it a little, he laughed. Actually laughed. The sound rusty but genuine, that's fair. But you're stuck with me now, forever. Till death do us part, and probably beyond that, because I'm too stubborn to let you go even in death. That's deeply unhealthy. That's love, Tesoro. He kissed me again. Russo love. Obsessive and eternal, and absolutely unhinged, Marco's voice carried from the hallway. Can I come back now? Uncle Luca says Papa is being dramatic again. Dominic called out. Come here, Figlio. Marco appeared, his eyes wary. Dominic pulled him close, then reached for me, gathering us both into his arms. Emma has agreed to marry me, he said quietly. To be part of our family, officially. How do you feel about that? Marco's face split into the biggest smile I'd ever seen, his arms wrapped around both of us. Really? Emma will be my mama forever? Forever. I confirmed, signing it simultaneously. If you want me to be. I've wanted that since the first day. His voice was still unpracticed, sweet. When you signed I see you, I knew you were supposed to be ours. Dominic's arms tightened around us both, and I felt his chest shake. My family, he breathed. My whole world in my arms. The wedding was private, just family and close associates in the estate's gardens on a crisp January morning. I wore a simple white dress, no veil, flowers in my hair. Marco stood beside Dominic as best man, his small suit perfectly tailored, his pride evident. Luca officiated, because of course Dominic's brother was ordained for exactly this purpose. My mother cried. Antonio, terrifying Antonio, smiled, and Dominic looked at me like I was salvation. Like I was everything he'd ever fought for, bled for, killed for. Finally within reach. I, Dominic Alessandro Russo, take you, Emma Chen, to be my wife, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, to have and to hold from this day forward, to protect and cherish, to love obsessively and completely until death tears me from you, and probably beyond that, because I'm not letting you go even in the afterlife. Luca coughed. That's not the traditional vow. I'm not a traditional man. Dominic's fingers tightened on mine. I'll love you violently and fiercely. I'll eliminate anyone who threatens you. I'll give you everything you could ever want, and things you didn't know you needed. I'll be your shelter and your storm, and I'll never ever let you doubt how completely you own me. Tears streamed down my face. I, Emma Chen, take you, Dominic Russo, to be my husband, to have and to hold, to keep grounded when your obsession gets scary, to love your son as my own, to be your partner in this dark, strange, beautiful life you've built. I smiled through tears, and to remind you daily that love doesn't require elimination of enemies. But I appreciate the thought, he grinned. Fierce and wild and utterly devoted. You may kiss your bride, Luca said. The kiss was soft, tender, full of promise and possession and love so intense it burned. When we pulled apart, Marco was signing frantically. Can I call you Mama now, officially? Officially, I signed back, and he launched himself at us, all of us tangling together in an embrace that felt like coming home. 6 months later, I found out I was pregnant. Dominic's reaction was predictable. Immediate lockdown of security, consultation with every obstetrician in the country, transformation of an entire wing of the house into a nursery that rivaled royal accommodations. He was overprotective to the point of insanity, tracking my every movement, monitoring my health obsessively. But he was also tender, reverent. His hands on my growing belly like he was touching something sacred. A daughter, he said one night, his palm pressed to where she kicked. I hope she looks like you, has your kindness, your strength. God help us if she has your stubbornness. He laughed. She'll be perfect, and terrifying, and so loved she'll never doubt it for a moment. Marco was thrilled at the prospect of a sibling. He'd practiced signing to my belly, telling his sister stories about the family she was joining. You're going to love Mama, he'd sign. She saved all of us. And maybe I had. Not in the dramatic way. I hadn't defeated enemies or solved impossible problems, but I'd seen a lost boy and refused to let him stay invisible. I'd given a grieving father hope. I'd taken a family broken by tragedy and helped them rebuild into something whole. And in return, they'd given me everything. Purpose. Love. A place where I belonged so completely that my old life felt like a faded photograph. The darkness was still there. Dominic still ran his empire with brutal efficiency. People still disappeared when they threatened us. Blood still stained the foundation of our perfect life, but it was our life, our family, our love. And I'd chosen it. Willingly. Completely. The day our daughter was born, Sophia, named for Marco's mother, Dominic held her with tears streaming down his face. She's perfect, he whispered. Like her mother. Like her brother. Perfect. Marco signed to his baby sister, welcome to the family. We're a little crazy, but we love each other so much it hurts. And Mama will always see you, Papa will always protect you, and I'll always be your big brother. I looked at my family, my husband, my son, my daughter, and felt the weight of my choices, the price of this life, the darkness I'd accepted, and I knew I'd do it all again, every moment, every compromise, every time I'd closed my eyes to violence and opened them to love, because this strange, dark, beautiful family was mine, and I was theirs, forever. Years later, when Sophia asked how her parents met, I'd smile and tell her the truth. Your father saw me, really saw me. And I saw his son when no one else did. We saved each other. That's romantic, she'd say. That's love, Dominic would add, pulling me close. Obsessive, possessive, completely unhinged love. The only kind worth having. And Marco, signing from across the room where he helped his baby sister with homework, would add, the best kind. The kind that lasts forever. He was right. We were violent and tender, dark and bright, broken and whole. We were the Russo family, and we were perfect exactly as we